And joining me now is a very special guest, joined by Michael Rubin, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Rubin. How are you seeing this escalating diplomatic war of words between India and Canada? What role specifically are you seeing Washington playing, given the fact that the U.S. Secretary of State Blinken has spoken about the need for India to cooperate with the Canadian probe? You've got James Sullivan, your national security advisor, saying no country should get special exemption for activities like the allegations made by Canada of involvement of Indian government agents. How are you seeing Washington's role?
Frankly, I'm seeing the United States try to kick the can down the road. I'm not going to put as negative a light on Secretary of State Blinken's comments. Look, the investigation could just as easily be India sharing information with regard to what they know about Nizar's involvement in the assassination of Rapudaman Singh Malik and shedding light on some of the gang warfare knowledge they have with regard to intra-Sikh dynamics. You know, back in April, 17 Sikhs were arrested in Sacramento, California, largely for their gang activity as well. It's a problem which India knows more about. Canada's playing catch up. The barometer you really need to look at in the United States is not what Tony Blinken says or Jake Sullivan says, but rather the rhetoric that's coming out of Congress. Mm-hmm. And I don't see Congress turning on India at this point. In fact, Khalistani activists have been trying to get Congress to turn, have been trying to target Hindu politicians of both parties, and it's happened without success. As long as Congress holds firm, I don't think India has anything to worry about.
So you don't see the United States being pushed into a position where they are being asked to choose between a treaty ally and an indispensable strategic partner?
Well, of course, both sides are trying to push the United States in that direction, but the United States isn't foolish enough to fall into that trap. And remember, while this is front and center between India and Canada right now, the United States has other problems with Canada. Mm-hmm. There's still a great deal of bitterness with Justin Trudeau with regard to the border closures during COVID, especially with regard to some of our large border cities like Detroit, Michigan, for example. At the same time, within intelligence and defense circles, there's been a great deal of frustration with Canada for not being serious, which is why Canada isn't being asked to be a part of the AUK-US partnership, which has been developing in the region. Canada simply isn't holding its water in a number of issues. This is simply the latest straw.
But there is also the fact that Canada and the United States are part of the Five Eyes intelligence that includes UK, Australia, New Zealand as well. And there's a sense it's the Americans who may well have shared signal intelligence, possibly as is being suggested, with the Canadians. Do you believe that the Americans could have shared intelligence with the Canadians that eventually led Justin Trudeau to go public?
Well, there's two different issues there. Did the Americans share intelligence? Yes. After the fact, to provide context. The fact that they didn't do so before the fact suggests there was no smoking gun, that it caught the American intelligence community by surprise, just like it caught Canadian police by surprise. If Canada keeps up its antics, suggesting that the United States has a smoking gun when it doesn't, pretty soon we're not going to be talking about the Five Eyes. We're going to be talking about the Four Eyes, because Canada can't continue to betray and politicize intelligence the way it is now.
So you think that Washington will get tough with Canada if Trudeau crosses a red line? Am I correct?
I believe that within not only the United States, but within Canadian security services as well, there's a belief that Trudeau has crossed a red line. You don't hint that intelligence is, to the extent it is, if you're not willing to share it. Now, in briefings inside Canada, the Premier of British Columbia, the province in which this happened, said basically what he got was an unclassified briefing that could have been assembled by Google. That doesn't suggest that there's a lot of there. And one thing to keep in mind here is while India is contextualizing Justin Trudeau as in over his head, Canadian journalists are doing the same thing. The age of governments being able to say, trust the intelligence is long since past us. Frankly, you can also blame the George W. Bush Iraq War fiasco for that. But Justin Trudeau is foolish if he believes that anyone is going to trust him in the United States when he can't even get Canadians to trust him.
There's also the comments which the Indian foreign minister made in the UN Security Council, where he says you cannot cherry pick when it comes to territorial integrity. Terrorism cannot become a weapon of a political agenda. Some way sending out signals that India will not tolerate Western hypocrisy, double standards, that the Canadians have for much too long been far too soft on those who advocate Khalistani separatism and possibly violence. Do you believe those comments will hit home?
I believe they already have had resonance. Look, the problem in Canada was not simply the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar and who may or may not have been behind it. This has been a problem ongoing for years. Under Justin Trudeau, and frankly, under Justin Trudeau's father, it's been addressed with utmost cynicism inside Canada. Now, if we put Canada aside, the attacks on the San Francisco consulate in the United States have also been a wake-up call on this. The fact of the matter is the Khalistani extremists are abusing the magnanimity of the Western system, and that has got to stop. At the same time, if there's any silver lining to this issue, it's the fact that no longer in Washington, no longer in Ottawa, are people going to ignore the Khalistani issue.
You know, that's what I wanted to understand. Are you saying even in Washington now there will be a tougher stand on those who are seen in the name of Khalistan to carry out protests of the kind that turned violent in San Francisco? Am I correct?
Traditionally, there has been a double standard. We haven't taken it seriously. We haven't understood that what the militants and extremists are saying here has absolutely no resonance in Punjab or India more broadly. This is something which is people are rapidly getting an education on. I would say the difference is the United States is willing to learn. Justin Trudeau is simply trying to save his neck.
So the big picture at the end of the day, you believe the events of the last 10 days have been a wake-up call for the Western world, particularly for Canada, to some extent for the United States, and you believe that Justin Trudeau has no option in a way but to pull back. He cannot be seen to be saber-rattling on sensitive intelligence issues. What if he turns around and says that we have hard information tomorrow and puts that out in the public domain? Will that change opinion if there is hard evidence put out of a so-called Indian hand?
Well, first of all, it's time for Justin Trudeau to put up or shut up. If he had the evidence, it should be presented. And if there is a hidden hand behind this murder, it also raises the question about who Hardeep Singh Nijjar was and why Canada was protecting him. You know, the people who are looking at Hardeep's background have already come forward with a lot of information. Pictures of Hardeep Singh Nijjar with AK-47s, which are illegal in Canada. Is this man really a plumber? What did Canada know, and why were they giving him exceptions to Canadian law at every single opportunity? I see an intelligence failure on part in parallel with what we saw before 9/11, where the FBI in the United States was ignoring Saudis coming, learning at flight schools how to take off, but having no interest in landing. After the fact, we're seeing a lot of dots that should have been put together by the intelligence services. That's what Canada should be focusing on, how they let this man into the system and why for so long they turned a blind eye to his terrorism.
Mr. Rubin, you've given us a very tough response, and you've in a sense put across what you believe is a growing anger over double standards even within a section of the Washington establishment when it comes to dealing with terror. I appreciate you joining me and speaking your mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you.